It is the 31st of March 2021. Welcome to Election Watch. My name is Chisha Chola. Now, with only 4 months, 12 days and 6 hours remaining to the elections, of course, we've seen a lot of stakeholders coming on board to monitor and give checks and balances to see what is going on throughout the electoral process. And of course, one of these groups that have been monitoring the electoral process is the Christian Churches Monitoring Group. And of course, have followed keenly, deeply, and of course, with scrutinizing every process that the Electoral Commission of Zambia has put across. And this afternoon, we do talk to one of the members from the CCMG, which is the Christian Churches Monitoring Group. This is the project manager, Mr. Peter Mwanangombe. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having CCMG. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's begin right into it. How do you feel, or what is your assessment as a group with the electoral process so far?
Well, the electoral process starts long before a number of activities that people would like to believe are actually what mark the electoral process. The electoral process leading to the 2021 election started way back, I think, from the time when there was, boundary delimitation and many other activities. So in terms of that, our assessment is that there are a number of things that still need to be addressed. There are a number of challenges that were observed, and I think there is an opportunity that together the Electoral Commission of Zambia and different stakeholders can begin to work towards. Some of these challenges, for instance, is the issue of COVID and how it affects electoral processes, and that it also meant that some activities had to, be moved ahead in the electoral process, unlike when there was no COVID, they would have been done much earlier. For instance, the Commission was planning to do voter registration around, say, May last year, but because of the COVID pandemic, a number of these activities had to be rescheduled. So we are in a place where we are pressed for time, and we hope that within the time that we have, a lot of other things, including voter education and civic education, will be accomplished.
All right, and of course, are you satisfied? You did mention that because of COVID, they've adjusted the dates. Are you satisfied with the revision of the dates of the whole electoral process so far?
The beauty about our current electoral process is that the date of the election is predetermined. It's known, and therefore it becomes very easy for the Commission to set out their dates. However, we believe that these dates could also be communicated earlier to stakeholders, because in most cases you find that voter registration is set for October 20th, and then October 28th, and then it starts November 9th. And stakeholders are only notified a day before. So we thought some of those improvements or some of those changes could be made well in advance, so that even those that are interested in the process could prepare adequately.
All right, let's get into the project that you did foster as CCMG, Christian Churches Monitoring Group. That is the People to List project. What's the progress with that particular project?
Well, as of 22nd March, we had to cancel the exercise, because at the time we were planning to roll it out, or when we were rolling it out, we had received communication from the Commission that the exercise is actually contravening Regulation 39 of the voter register regulation.
I was about to ask you that.
Yeah, so then that meant that we could not proceed with the activity. However, just maybe a background in terms of what it intended to do and what we intended to achieve. So this is an exercise that facilitates for an audit. So it's a type of an audit of a voters register. So we wanted to conduct the People to List. A People to List entailed that we go in the field, identify a certain group of people. We had a certain category in terms of age as well as gender, and then we interview them. Our interview was based on their experience with the 2020 voter registration exercise, and then we would go ahead and ask them if they were comfortable to go ahead and also share their voter registration card details as well as their NRC. The idea then is for then CCMG to go back and then be able to check their registration on their behalf, right, using the systems that are already in place to check their registration and if their registration is correct. When CCMG, or if CCMG found out that the registration is correct, CCMG would call them to say, we had collected these details from you during this exercise, and we believe that your registration was correct. Even if it wasn't correct, we'd still go ahead and do that. The reason why we're doing that exercise is, one, to ensure that those people that wanted to register, or those people that registered, are indeed registered and appear on the voters register. Okay? And secondly, that even when they are registered and appear on the register, their details on the register are actually also correct. Because remember, if you follow our reports, you will see from the by-elections and many other elections that we've observed, you will note that there is a number, no matter how small it is, of people that are not allowed to vote on election day, either because their names do not appear on the register, or their names are captured differently from what is on the card as well as what is on the register. So the exercise is meant to check against that and ensure that the register is to some extent complete and also captures the true details of those people that claim to have been registered.
But then what's the purpose of the voter verification if you as an independent group would want to do that? Isn't that more like getting into the job of the the Electoral Commission? So
the exercise doesn't take away the issue of verification, and we are very clear on that. What that does is that we are doing an audit of a register, and an independent audit of a register allows for us to have an assessment of the quality of a register. So if we had gone ahead with this exercise, and if it was not in contravention with any law, our findings would have helped to give recommendations or give an opinion on the completeness, or on the, I want to say, there's a word that I'm looking for, so that we have an assessment of the actual register in terms of did it really capture the people that it intended to capture, and if it did, were these people captured correctly? Remember that I talked about the background, that people would go to a polling station, but would be turned away because they did not, their names did not appear on the register. So any register that you develop for an election should be very close to being complete, accurate, as well as correct. So that would then add to the credibility of the register. So each register, or every register, should at least accommodate, give every opportunity, an opportunity to everyone that is of age to register, and those that registered, that all their details are correct. That is the intention of that activity. And I'm sure this is also what the ECZ wants to do, to give an opportunity to a person who registered but their names were omitted, that they can correct that. So what we're trying to do is just to assess the level of correctness of a register as it is a provisional register.
But didn't you do your background check list to really, before you commence a project, to check if it's not contradicting with the laws of Zambia?
Right. So CCMG is an organization that is committed to adherence, or adhering to the electoral legal framework, because we believe that if we are going to, call on people to, adhere to this, ourselves should first of all, be compliant. So what we did is that prior to the voter registration exercise, we wrote to the Electoral Commission of Zambia requesting for guidelines and regulations that will guide the 2020 voter registration exercise. But the Commission did not write back to us or inform us or give us anything that was in that regard. What we also know is that there was a process where the current regulation was being revised. And once it was revised, this document that we are talking about was revised and I think approved in September 2020. And it's not, according to the parameters that we searched looking for this document, was first of all the ECZ website, and it's not there on the ECZ website. So we looked at the general regulation, And within the general regulation probably is where we felt, well, there was nothing that was limiting in terms of the exercise that we do. But this is not to say we want to apportion blame or anything, no, because what CCMG did after that notification from the Commission was that we issued a statement to withdraw the exercise, to cancel the exercise, but also write to the Commission acknowledging receipt of their letter, as well as informing them of that cancellation. And we are happy that the Commission equally responded to us and appreciated the fact that we went ahead and respected that the law is available to do this, and then we cannot continue with this exercise.
All right, so apart from the law being there, what other concerns did the electoral body give to you as an independent group?
Well, there are no other concerns because, like we said, on the 19th of February, before even commencing the exercise, we equally wrote to the Commission explaining to them the methodology that we're going to use, and also requesting for a meeting with the technical people to explain further what was going to happen during that time. So our belief or our thinking is that the commission should begin now to be more open, especially to people that request for these, engagement, so that they are able to, seek clarification. The Electoral Commission of Zambia is there to manage elections, and all of us are only players within there. So they are the custodians of that law and all the other laws that relate to elections, and should be able to guide. And especially where, organizations like ourselves even went a step further to inform them well in advance of the activity, we felt it was important that the Commission took time to, listen or look at our request and even grant it either in writing or actually, invite us to a meeting where we would have shared our methodology with them.
So what next after this?
Well, after this, CCMG is still determined to pursue the issue of auditing the voters' register. The circumstances or the motivation for doing so have not changed, and so we're still engaging with the Commission to find ways of doing that. The people to list test is just one test that you can use to audit the register. There is also the computer-based test where the Commission provides the provisional register to an independent organization like CCMG, and we do a computer test, and then after which our findings are shared with the Commission, so that whatever recommendations are made within the most the possible, shortest possible time or window, those challenges could be addressed, and then we move towards having a register that is complete, accurate, as well as correct.
And the computer test really does not in anyhow infringe any policy or law that is in line with the electoral body?
Well, because at that time you are not asking anyone, so this should be a document, because what the computer test will do is that you just run certain parameters. There are certain things that you put in place. You run those checks and you are able to get your results. Some of the things that people are concerned about in the register are, of course, the age limit for persons to register. So we would run a check against anybody that is under the age of 18, for instance. Other issues of concern in the register could be when you have too many people that are over the age of 100 on the register. That also becomes a slight challenge, because then you look at your life expectancy and then you compare that against how many people of that age would be on the register. So you run different parameters to be able to check against the register. So it's something that is not something that is permissible, I believe, because then access to that register is actually granted by the Electoral Commission of Zambia. Yeah. So.
All right. Now, with the voter verification physical, of course, that's commenced on Monday, the 29th of March, 2021. What is your role as a group? And of course, looking at it that you are monitoring these elections, you are the watchdog of the elections. What is your role at CCMG? So
for voter verification, there are a number of procedures that have been set by the Electoral Commission of Zambia. So if you went to the center and you discovered that your name does not appear on the register, you could ask that your name be retained on the register or be put on the register. And those are the procedures that we are monitoring. So currently we have a total of 330 monitors across the 156 constituencies of this country. and they are going to sampled polling stations, or rather registration centers, where this verification exercise is taking place. And our interest really is to go where the ECZ have put those kits that are meant to, for replacement of cards, for example, relocations, as well as for adding people that might not have been added. They registered but their names do not appear, to do so. So there are a number of procedures that we want to observe and to see how ECZ is doing in terms of compliance, but also look at the end of the applicant. Are they fulfilling what they need to fulfill? Are they eligible to actually register and things like that? So it's a whole range of things that we are looking out for. But of course, we are also encouraging people to, if they haven't done their inspection or they haven't done their verification using the star, is it star 214 hash USSD, they do so because it saves them time, and they'll be able to, from the comfort of their home, know that their details are captured correctly. But if they are not captured correctly, let them find, a designated registration center within their ward where they can have, their details corrected. Because remember, like I said again, and I'll keep repeating this, you could have a voter's card, but as long as your name does not appear in the register, you will never vote. You could have a voter's card, but as long as the name that is on the card does not match the one that is on the, on the register, you will not vote. You could have a voter's card, but the NRC number appearing on the voter's card is different from the one that is appearing on your national ID. You have challenges voting. So we don't want anybody that registered not to vote because they did not verify their details. So they have this opportunity to have their details verified and then corrected if they need to be corrected.
All right. What lacunas have you seen so far in the voter verification exercise?
Well, I think there's not been much in terms of raising awareness towards this activity. It's a very important undertaking, and I think there was need to really intensify engagement with stakeholders as well as the general citizenry on the need for doing so. But also, one would argue that the time period given for this exercise could have been made longer, so that people can also, spend a bit more time verifying and ensuring that all these things are done correctly. But one more important thing is that, and we keep asking this from the Commission, it's very easy when you tell stakeholders to say we are deploying X number of kits to X number of registration centers. Our role as civil society will be to direct people to those specific destinations. But if that is not there, then it becomes difficult for even those that are mobilizing to be able to direct people to the right places to go and do this. Right now, what is happening is that you find that one center is open, and that center should be the one that should have had the kit. But when our observers go on the ground, they are directed to another polling station which has a kit. Now look at this. We don't mind our observers going because we can provide for their movement. But look at this person who does not have resources to start moving from one registration center to the other to go and have their voter details verified. This is a demotivating factor. As much as possible, all we need to do with these exercises is to find ways how we can incentivize them so that citizens are more interested in doing these exercises, because once they miss them, it means that they miss the opportunity to vote as well.
All right, and do you feel really that with all this that you've assessed so far, do you feel that we could have a free and fair elections coming 12th August 2021?
Well, a determination of free and fair elections is not something that is just determined on one aspect. And if you read now, the narrative has moved towards free and fair elections, because free and fair can mean different things for different people. Yes. We would like to think of elections as credible, transparent, and inclusive. That way we are able to say, okay, was the election, were the processes transparent? How open was the Electoral Commission in terms of coming forth with information regarding the different processes? Was it inclusive? What measures did the Commission take in place to ensure that women, persons with disabilities, and youths are able to access these facilities? Was it inclusive? So at what level or at what point was there discrimination, you know, in terms of administering or running these processes. That for us gives us a fair understanding of how the process was, and then it helps us to make a judgment of what the outcome would be, especially given other events that are still coming. So to judge, to talk about free and fair is not something that we are in a position to do, but rather would like to look at it from an angle of credibility, transparency,
but so far, do you
inclusion.
think there is credibility enough?
Well,
do you think it's transparent enough? Do you think there is inclusion?
Well, I think there is a lot that needs to be done. I've told you about the,
Yes.
the lapses in communication from
Yes.
the Electoral Commission of Zambia's end. I think there is need for improvement there. And so these are things that would raise questions in terms of transparency, because one should be happy when they hear that there is an independent organization that wants to conduct an audit of the register. They said, oh, yeah, they're doing a good job, because then they'll tell us what we might have missed in the process. You understand? So it's something that is done to enhance the credibility of the process. You know, inclusion. Were there ramps? You know, did people with persons with disabilities struggle? Did they find any barriers when they were doing registration? The Zafod has done an observation, and they've come up with very interesting findings and also recommendations going forward. How have those recommendations been, you know, taken into consideration by the Commission during this verification exercise? That would determine the level of inclusion of different interest groups and many other things. So those are our parameters for measuring elections, and not just saying free and fair.
Talking about inclusion, of course, this is something that is very important, because for elections to be free and fair, everyone should be included as well. But of course, coming back to your assessment, do you believe ECZ could do more to include people who are living with disabilities, or let me just say the minority groups?
Absolutely. I mean, there was a court order in 2015, in 2011, sorry, in the case of Sela Brotherton and others versus the ECZ.
Yes.
You know, and that judgment spells out what the Commission needs to do in order to make electoral services and elections accessible to persons with disability. One of the things that they need to do is to ensure that the polling stations are accessible. Now, accessibility is not just about ramps. It's also about sufficient lighting.
Yes.
For persons with albinism, right?
Yes.
It's also about the size of the door. You can't have a door size that cannot allow a wheelchair to go in. Remember that a person has to mark their ballot in secret. And if you're going to have this person, you know, not go in a booth and access a polling booth, then they are really not enjoying the service. The service is not being, they're not accessing it as much as they needed to access it. So if all those things are taken into consideration, the height of the booth and all those things, braille jackets or templates for blind people and things like that, all those are things that facilitate for persons to enjoy their rights to vote. And if there are no deliberate moves or, you know, strategies to address these, then it becomes an issue, because a number of people will be systematically excluded.
Then why not really, as a monitoring group that is making sure that you're giving checks and balances here, then why not from the start try to push policies that deliberately put the people in minority groups in certain committees that will foster, you know, inclusion? Because, you know, we can literally maybe assess how many people are in the committees, because people would take it lightly, because maybe they do not have representation from the committees, and they say, oh no, we're going to create this, and you know, people are going to come through, going to create ramps. But maybe if there is someone in the committee, it creates a much bigger voice. Maybe did you try to push for that?
Well, I don't believe there should even be a committee, because an order is an order from the court, and its implementation is very important. And therefore, groups like Zafod, like I've said, they've got a mechanism that they are using to be able to measure that. But also, throughout CCMG's observation, be it by elections, be it voter registration and many other processes, we include issues of accessibility for persons with disabilities. And for us, our report then will inform the next course of action for groups like, you know, Zafod. So when they read, and this is the reason why CCMG is out there every day, is to generate, credible information, researched information, accurate information, so that these groups are able to, because they are not, maybe they don't have the means, or maybe they don't have within their programming, programs to go and monitor at a scale that maybe CCMG would like to monitor. But then that doesn't mean if they don't monitor, they can't use information that is available.
Yes.
So they should take pride and get information that CCMG has generated for them, because it's factual, and be able to use it to say, look, CCMG's findings during this by-election indicate that only 3% of the polling stations, out of 33 polling stations, only 3% of them had ramps. That is telling. That should compel the Electoral Commission of Zambia to do something about it. And this does not only speak to the Electoral Commission of Zambia. Look, inclusion is also about the levels of political violence. Our reports have constantly indicated the need for the police to be vigilant and to be able to address these issues. Our reports have constantly talked about the need for political parties to, start inculcating the spirit of peace and coexistence among each other in order to avoid violence. All these reports, all these recommendations are there. We are also not saying we will not look at the next course of action. Within our plan, especially for the 2022-2026 electoral cycle, we'll be looking at how do we then strengthen some of these institutions, but also how do we push for reforms within the electoral sector, so that then we speak to issues of policy, like you are saying. How do we address issues of policy at violence level? What do we need to do? So those are things that we'll try to address once we have an assessment of the 2021 electoral period, that what were the challenges, right? And then we are able to then, okay, these are policy level challenges, these are institutional level challenges, and these are administrative challenges. So ECZ, what can you do with these administrative challenges? One of the things that CCMG did earlier on in 2019, if not 2020, was to do a review of the Electoral Code of Conduct. And this was after we saw that there was a lot of violence. People were dying in the Kaoma incident, for example. Yes. So we said, is there something that we can do? Could this thing be strengthened? So we did a review and made recommendations. One of the things that we did there is to ask that, can the Electoral Code of Conduct have a fast-track kind of system to deal with violence that is really in the public domain? Somebody has died in Western Province or in Lusaka, right? There is no need for I need to use a different province from Lusaka. Somebody has died in Luapula. It's a by-election. There is no need for the Luapula district, conflict management to sit, discuss. There is no need for the province to discuss, and then later on the national, to discuss. Is something that is already happened. So how can we deal with it? And if perpetrators are known, why can't the law take its course immediately? So those are the recommendations that we are making. We need to classify these offenses: first class, second class. First class requires that there is fast track. These issues are dealt with within the shortest period of time. Remember that elections are a timed activity, so you can't have these things dragging. Because people out there also need to, see that justice is done and that the law also takes its course. So those are some of the things that we looked at within the Electoral Code of Conduct and made appropriate recommendations. Right now, you have the Commission of Inquiry report on voting patterns and electoral violence. It's a very good report. It details, the different levels of violence, how these come up, what is really the cause, and how they could be dealt with. So that's a report that needs to be used by everyone, including yourselves as the media, to be able to speak to issues of ending political violence. Because political violence, at the end of the day, translates into very few people going to do what? To cast their vote. And you don't want to have a register with 7 million people, but only 2 million people turning out to vote.
All right. Do you see that happening? Especially with the aspect of voter apathy. increasing. People are no longer interested in voting for a lot of reasons. Do you see that happening? Maybe we do have 7 million, people who have registered to vote, but the actual turnout is lesser.
Yeah, so like I said, so some of these things need to be addressed now. Issues of political violence, we need to find a solution to this. I think and now it's actually incumbent upon the different political parties that are going to contest the election, independent candidates, the media, civil society, and the church to begin to talk about things that really matter. It's not about calling each other names. Let's differ on ideology, but let's coexist. It doesn't benefit anybody to stone the other friend. It doesn't benefit anyone to, smash one person's car. So for us, we believe we can still dialogue, we can still have different opinions, but at the end of the day, let's coexist. Civil society has got a role to play, and the big one for that matter, sensitization. Awareness raising. The church equally can do that because the church commands a lot of following in this country and in other countries because there's a church everywhere. So let's use those structures to talk about coexistence and the need for people to go out there and, vote. They've registered quite okay, but then what happens if somebody comes to buy their voter's card? What happens if somebody comes to intimidate them and say, I shouldn't see you go to a polling station tomorrow? So these are things that we need to guard against. But also the electorate needs to know that it's worthless for one to sell their voter's card. It doesn't benefit them in any way. You could exchange it you can't exchange a voter's card for a bag of meal, for a 50 kwacha. When you look at the report on voting, political violence and voting patterns, you'll be amazed that people were being offered the 2 kwacha and the 1 kwacha in exchange for their vote. Are we really at that level as citizens? No, we can do better. You cannot sell something that you really earned. You have earned it. It's your right. You need to exercise it. So we need to let the communities know that a 2 kwacha is nothing compared to a voter's card. A vote for them should be able to translate into meaningful development, into meaningful policies, into meaningful systems, education systems, health systems, and things like that. But if you stay away from home, it doesn't still help you. So all of us need to participate in these elections and play our part.
All right, you've mentioned quite a lot of times about political violence. What is the solution really to this? Because it's like you've mentioned, it could affect the electoral process. All right, but as CCMG, what do you think could be the solution to political violence?
Well, I think there are a number of solutions to that. Some of them are long-term. Some of them require really behavioral change. Some of them are things that we can change at a high level. And at a higher level, it's about the leaders of all these political parties and how they, form their structures, and also redefining the role of young people, because half the time, at the center of all this violence, you will never see an old man.
Yes.
You will never see an old man. At the center of all this, you see young men, you see young women. Okay? And so it's about time that political parties define the role of young people within their political structures. Should they only just be used to mobilize, sing, clap, and fight on their behalf? No. Young people can also vie for office. They can also, work within the party structures and contribute meaningfully. Here we are. I believe that you and I are young people,
yes,
that we're able to have this conversation. And this is what it should be. So a redefinition of the role of young people in politics is important. But I can bet you this, the biggest people to call this to an end are the leaders of these political parties.
But what do you think should be done to really kill it off?
Well, they need to take decisive action. I mean, it's about having civil politics. You shouldn't hate me. I shouldn't hate you because I hold a different opinion from you. It shouldn't be an issue because I wear a different color in terms of political regalia from yours, right? At the end of the day, we live in one community, and trust me, when you go to these communities, you find that these parties actually interact, but we are given an impression, or it's certain times when we are shown a picture that these people can be bought off, can be paid to go and cause problems in other areas. Another issue that could help this is the importation of cadres. As you know, there is this tendency, especially during by-elections, that people from Lusaka are taken to the Copper Belt, or people from the Copper Belt are taken to Luapula to go and probably maybe intimidate or marshal party gatherings and things like this. In the end, these are the people that cause confusion. But if the people within there can already coexist, they know their limits, they know how they live with each other. And so it's an issue of putting an end or a stop to importation of cadres from one area to another, because it's cited as one of the issues that could or that causes political violence.
Could there be any external solution to this? What I mean by external, because you talked about behavioral change, and that is an instinct. It's inside, all right? It's something that is embedded inside a particular human being. But do you think maybe people who've got authority could, be able to push some external policies to curb violence, political violence, physical violence?
I'm not sure there is need for that, because if I stone you, if I fight you,
yes,
there is already a law that will protect either you or me,
yeah,
from that violence, right?
Yes.
And the thing is that there's just been reluctance from the people that enforce the law to enforce it as such. Secondly, there's been reluctance from the Electoral Commission of Zambia to bring to book those people that breach the Electoral Code of Conduct. So there is nothing that you want to change in terms of law.
Is it been reluctant or it's been weak?
Well, you can call it anything, but it's for us, it's something that is really puzzling, that you have something that you could use to regulate the space and ensure that there is peace and calm, but then that is not done. So there's reluctance to deal with issues.
Because the reason why I'm asking is we've seen videos of cadres capturing videos and telling the policeman in authority certain words, and these words could be words that could be intimidating to the authority. And this is why I'm asking, is it being reluctant, or it's either being weak or being incompetent? Because we do know the law, but why don't we follow the law?
I believe that a number of police officers out there are well trained, and they are also trained to follow the law, and so it's actually puzzling that they can actually be intimidated, yeah, by somebody, and so this goes to show how much power certain individuals in this country have, as compared to others. So again, it's an issue of how do we strengthen some of these institutions? How do we then compel them to do the right thing? So, like I said, it's an issue of just paying a blind eye to one thing and wanting to be very active when it's another group that is doing it, which is not the case. And I think even within civil society, all these happen. You find that the application of the law with regards public order, for instance, is selective. Some are able to be given, permit or being given the necessary accommodations when they want to do a protest. Others are being stopped from doing that. But we're in one country and probably actually are protesting or demonstrating against the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is need for the police to relook at the way they manage the Public Order Act, and I think this year will really be an important year for the police to demonstrate that they actually cannot be told what to do by anybody other than what is established within the establishment of the Zambia Police Service, as it were.
All right. Indeed, you are watching Election Watch, and we do have Mr. Peter Mwanangombe, who is the project manager of the Church's Christian Monitoring Group. And of course, if you want to call us and be able to join the discussion, call us with the number that is showing on the screen, and of course, add your voice to this pertinent issue that adds to national interest and development. Of course, let's get to the Public Order Act. All right. Do you believe it's been fairly applied? With regards, we've seen, just as I was coming for this important interview, I saw a number of a lot of groupings of political parties campaigning in the streets of Kalingalinga. All right. But once a particular political party is doing the same, they are tear gassed, they're killed, or they are, done something to them barbarically. What is your assessment with regards of applying the Public Order Act?
First of all, the Public Order Act is a document, or is a law of 1956. 1956. That was during the colonial times. So, and when you look at the objects of that law and the circumstances now, clearly a lot has changed, and therefore that law needed also to change with the times. That law is supposed to benefit the ordinary citizens and ensure that their safety, their property is protected. But what we see today is that because of the selective application of this particular law,
yes,
it has caused what we are calling a shrinking civic space. And hear me, I'm talking about civic space because
yes,
it's not only political parties that are affected, but even civil society organizations have been victims of this law. So this law needed to be amended. First of all, there was an amendment that was necessitated by the Christine Mulundika case versus others, which was to do with the issue of moving from from permit to notification, because it was unconstitutional for one to seek permission for them to enjoy their right to assemble as well as to associate. So that transitioning has not really seen light of day, and so you keep hearing the police and people referring to permit when in actual fact it's just supposed to be notification. So already we can see that there's a lot that needs to be done to this law, both as a law in text, in terms of changing it so that it addresses the real issues that are at hand, but also changing its implementation. I'm aware that groups of civil society organizations did do a lot of work around the review of the Public Order Act, and made suggestions on how this law could be improved. For example, they were suggesting compelling the police to be able to notify you, give you a date within 14 days when you can have your next rally, or when you can have your rally, so that it's being policed. And they should do that, one, in writing, and ensure that that day that they give you, there will be no changes to that day. Because the reasons that they may give, for example, we don't have manpower. So if they're going to give you an alternative date, then they need to work towards ensuring that they have manpower for you to go ahead and do that. So the idea of Public Order Act, like the name suggests, is to ensure public order. Yes. Everybody needs public order. But do the current objects, as the bill is, address those issues? The answer is no. So there is need for both reformation of this law in terms of its text, the way it reads, its objects, as well as how it's being administered and implemented.
What else could you suggest to be added or amended to this particular law?
Well, I think a number of people still refer to the issue of notification as permit. So that needs to change, right? The police need to know, once you notify the police, within a certain period of time, they're supposed to write back to you, telling you whether you are able to proceed with your gathering or not. And if you're not able to proceed with your gathering, reasons are given and an alternative date is suggested. Which date should never change, because then now what they are telling you is that today we are not prepared, but on this day we will be prepared to have you do your work. Yeah.
All right. Now, still on the same, like I mentioned, I gave an example of a particular grouping, which I don't want to mention, was campaigning in the streets of Kalingalinga just now. Don't you think this is already not fair enough in terms of the level playing ground for all political parties? All right, because it gives them an advantage with regards to in terms of people voting with others, because when the actual campaign period hasn't even commenced, they're still on the ground campaigning.
So this is, again, that we talk about. The official campaign period is known, and so the Electoral Commission of Zambia, working with the police and other law enforcement agencies, should be able to take interest and already begin to sanction or take action or caution or reprimand, begin taking some concrete steps to address this issue, because like you are rightly said, others are there campaigning, but if another group goes there, they will be dispersed, tear gases will fly, things like that, and all things like that. So it's about how now the police is implementing the Public Order Act. Are they reluctantly implementing it towards others and actively implementing it towards others? Those are issues that we constantly see and we've constantly talked about. So, and I believe that even now as we speak, there are a number of interest people, police and others that are listening.
Yes.
And it's incumbent upon themselves to take the necessary action. If this is not possible, is it possible for the Electoral Commission of Zambia then to do something? And I think the law is sufficient enough and provides guidelines for what the Electoral Commission of Zambia needs to do. So I think they need not to be reminded, but they have the tools. They could review, they could read and find out what is limiting within what is provided, and be able to use what is, permissible to deal with issues that have got potential of, creating an environment that is not balanced for either political parties to fulfill their duties in the electoral process.
So with all this being discussed, all the lacunas that you've mentioned, could truly, I ask you again, are we going to have the free and fair elections coming 12th August 2021?
Well, like I said, it's not about free and fair. Right now we are talking about
yes, let's use it in your
right now we are looking at the
objectives, credibility,
yes.
transparency.
So, exactly. And if you read our 2016 election report,
yes,
we cite things like, issues of press freedom, access to the media, what are we calling it? Selective implementation of the Public Order Act, and many other things as issues that characterized the election. And then, with all these, it becomes very, difficult to say this election is in this way or this election is in that way. So it's an assessment of everything. And what we are saying is that all these things are indicators towards an election that might not be, I'm not saying that this is going to be the case, yes. That might not be credible, because we are saying others had undue advantage,
yes.
Which is not supposed to be the case. Remember that elections everywhere are held within a certain legal framework, but also those principles are drawn from international as well as regional best practices or principles to which Zambia has signed to. So all these things, whatever we do here, we shouldn't do them in a vacuum. And this is why it's important that our the enforcers of the law, the Electoral Commission of Zambia, also pay attention to how are we as a country, during this period, adhering to these principles of holding democratic elections.
Yes.
Because to tell you the truth, the principles of holding democratic elections do not say one can campaign and the other one should not be allowed. No, they call for balanced and equal participation as well as coverage and many other things. So it's about a reflection of how did we fare in 2016 and what do we want to see in 2020. Ours is we are determined to monitor and make all these observations and engage institutions. But what do we do if we have institutions that we write to, to engage them and they don't come back to us or they don't give us an opportunity to engage with them?
Yes.
So it's one thing, we've really done a lot in terms of engaging different stakeholders, but do they really come forth? No.
Yeah. But maybe they think that with obviously the thought that is always there that churches shouldn't really involve themselves in such things. Maybe they think.
What do you mean when you say churches should not involve themselves in such things? In
politics and the electoral process? A lot of people have come out to say that.
Perhaps there need to be a distinction between involving yourselves in politics, yes, and involving yourselves in processes that matter. Electoral processes are for everybody. Let's take, for instance, voter registration.
Yes.
So you would want the church to keep quiet and not sensitize anybody about the need for them to go out and register to vote.
Yeah.
Would you want that situation?
All right. So,
right? So it's this thing. So you cannot divorce the activities of the church in terms of appealing to people to do the right thing, right? But the church will never go into partisan politics.
Some churches have.
Well, those I don't know who those churches are,
And
but
we've
I
seen
can.
videos of
But at
of-
least
of
I can.
that.
I can guarantee you
Yeah.
the 3 church mother bodies that are part of the CCMG will never do that. And these are churches that have got principles. These are churches that have got strong leadership that you can follow and be able to engage and address. This is a church that was relied upon in 1991, for
Yes.
instance, to unify this country. And this is the church, and these are the churches that will continue to be relied upon. Forget about those other churches which we don't know. At least we are able to talk about these 3, and we can confidently speak about them because we've seen the value of their work. We've seen their involvement in politics in terms of trying to ensure that there is decency in politics and not. So there's a difference actually in being involved in politics as well as partisan politics. There is no harm in being involved in politics.
All right.
Because politics is about policies, it's about
Yes.
ideas, it's about tolerance and many other things. But partisan politics is a different thing altogether. So the church will always be there to participate in this electoral process,
All right,
whether
quickly,
people actually like it or not.
My last question, I know we should be done by now, but my last question to you as the Christian Churches Monitoring Group, what is your appeal to the people and the stakeholders as we head towards the 12th August 2021 elections?
Well, I think first and foremost, while this exercise is still ongoing
in a
of
minute,
verification, people need to take advantage of that and be able to verify. But also we are calling for calm, tolerance, coexistence and peace among everybody. To all the civil society organizations, I think there's something that they can do. The media yourselves, please ensure that we accommodate everybody and accommodate dissenting views, because it's from these dissenting views that we are able to learn and also, unlearn certain things. So everybody has got a role to play in this electoral process, and it's important that we work together.
Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Peter Mwanangombe, of course, the project coordinator for CCMG. Yes, we were talking to Mr. Peter Mwanangombe, who is coming from the Christian Churches Monitoring Group. My name is Tisha Chola. This has been Election Watch. We are back next week at 15 hours. We are watching.